again, it's time for the visit with the person of high strangeness. Today, what we're going to do today, we are going to take you out of your, out of that safe place that I take you to, out of that good line of thinking, because today I want to shake you up a little bit. This is actually the first of a series of 2 shows we're going to do about prisons. And I'm not going to be very careful as to how I do things or word things, because sometimes we hear something, but we don't comprehend it. And we have talked about these things in passing, because in a way they are not prison issues, they are human rights issues. And so I don't want to talk about it in passing. I want you to be alert and aware of what we are telling you, and try to focus that in your mind, because it really might be important to you as a person or as a family member one day. And so if that subject bothers you for any reason, I would suggest that maybe you'll come and join us next week. Hopefully you will stay with us throughout this whole hour, because we really want to talk about some things that concern almost all of us. And so with that, I'm going to introduce you to my guest, Fred Markham. Hello, Fred. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
It was just accidentally that I got to meet you. Today's our first time we ever spoke in person. Did you have a nice drive to Olympia?
Yes, it was okay. It was a little bit cloudy and foggy and one kind of thing, but it was an easy drive down.
And where did you come from today?
We're from Monroe right now.
Monroe?
Yes.
Okay. For the friends that don't live here, can you kind of tell us where Monroe is?
It's east of Everett, Washington, towards Stevens Pass.
Oh, towards the pass.
Yeah, it's where Prison Legal News was founded, at the prison there at Monroe at the Reformatory. So we've taken it almost back home again. We're on the outside instead of on the inside.
Almost back over there. So our opening shot was really appropriate. Yeah. It's just a smaller fence, and you can see
smaller fence.
Tom Stahl is a friend that had arranged for us to do this show, because we had, like I was telling the friends, we had talked about some of these in passing now. To get from the beginning to the paper, which is actually the Prison Legal News, would you mind if we kind of went backwards in time a little bit and tell the friends a little bit who you are as a person?
Oh, as a person. I've been doing prison time since I was a kid, essentially. I was a burglar. I went through the prison systems of the United States, mostly through Texas, where I did 27 years, and I've done 37 years in prison altogether. And I got out 4.5 years ago and was working as a volunteer for Prison Legal News. And about 3.5 years ago, I took over the paper, doing all the outside work on it. A lot of the inside work is done by our editor, Paul Wright, who's in prison here at McNeil Island. And we have writers in just essentially all over the country, many writers in prisons everywhere.
Let's pick that apart a little bit, because there was sort of a summary of all the things I wanted to do today. So let's pick this apart. Okay, you said you have been in the system for a very long time.
Yes.
And you have agreed that I can play devil's advocate here. I'm going to take the role of the viewers for a minute, or some of the viewers. So here you are. You have been in prison almost all your adult life, I would assume?
From 21 years old until 60.
And you did take responsibility for what you did?
Oh, yes.
You know, because a lot of people, they blame things on everyone else.
No. I blame, if I had to blame anything, it'd be on greed and laziness.
Oh, wow. But I really appreciate your honesty here. And the reason I want to establish that too, so because we're going to call the kettle black here, and then because eventually we want to go to some people that's in prison that wasn't really supposed to be there.
A lot of people.
A lot of people. So now, as a young person, now you're in prison and somewhat naive, I would assume, because
yes,
you
did
get
naive,
caught. Yeah. And so now you get your education. What did that consist of?
Well, through prison, it's a changing, constant, high-velocity life that is 99% boredom and about 5% sheer terror. And most of the time, prison is boring. So the main thing you do when you're learning about prison, and too many people don't do it, is you keep your mouth shut and you watch what other people do. And those that live successful, reasonable lives, you emulate those, and those that have great deals of problems, you don't do that. But in American prison, we have the opposite going on.
The opposite going on. But so then you can take, at one time you could take classes and things like that, because that's almost coming to an abrupt end.
Yes.
So tell me what you're feeling as a person in the penitentiary.
Well, when you first go there, you're scared to death.
Scared.
Especially if you're young and you don't know what's going on around you. So you just have to kind of acclimate to what the situation is. And back in the early days, in the early 50s when I first went to prison, there was a lot of educational programs, and it was in a sense easier to deal with doing time then than it is now. In where I started in California prisons. When I escaped from California and went to Texas, I found a whole different world.
You escaped?
Yes, I've escaped 3 times. When I went to Texas, I found that hard labor was the way you went. And it was extremely difficult life for some years until I figured out that you had to work not just by going in and just doing everything you're told, but you manipulated the system.
That was part of the education where I'm going to. So like I said, you go in, you're very naive, now you have learned all of that, and now you're at the point where you have learned things, and now you can sort of at least make an attempt to change things while you're
your own existence, if nothing else.
Right.
Yes, you can make things easier on yourself if you can manipulate the system a little bit.
Okay, so now where I want to go now is with this is, so now you've been in and out of prison, and now you are the manager for Prison Legal News.
Yes, I do the production management.
One of the things that we talked about, I thought was interesting, that they are registered with the Justice Department.
Well, we're cataloged and indexed by most major law libraries in the United States and organizations like that, but the Justice Department also catalogs and indexes us. And it's possibly to keep track of what we're doing.
Yeah, that's right, because what I ran into when I kind of researched that a little bit, was it in New Hampshire or in Nevada? Which state was it that put you on the blacklist? You couldn't.
Well, we've had that problem in several states, but Nevada was the most recent.
That's the one
Yes,
it was.
yes, and we took them to court over it, and they acquiesced to our demands and had to pay us a little bit to do that. But now we flow freely into the Nevada prison system. Washington State also denied us at one time.
I find the Prison Legal News very educational for multiple reasons here. Like today, I want to be the public, but I'm also a family member, and then eventually I work that in here, also because it really addresses legitimate concerns of human beings. Whether they in prison or not, that's not the issue. I don't think it has anything to do with where you come from, who you are, and what you are there for. It's a human issue. Would you agree?
Well, what was intended with Prison Legal News when it first started almost 11 years ago was to educate prisoners, and it was originally called Prisoners Legal News. But we soon discovered that we had a great audience on the outside that was interested in what we were saying. So during the conversion years of the early 90s, it became Prison Legal News and was focused more on the orientation towards, so that people on the outside could also see what was going on and read it.
Well, to me as a family member in particular, this is of interest to me because nobody's going to tell me what's going on anyway. And
well, what prisons try to do, the people that administrate prisons, is to keep everything a secret from the people on the outside.
That's correct. Now throughout the show, we have chosen animals in a zoo type setting. And if you notice, anytime you see one of these animals, they're in a very nice fenced little area, and it's very clean. And I'm probably going to upset some people here, but I think our animals have more rights as human beings. Would you agree? Yes,
and because an animal doesn't have the thinking capability of a human being, they're more satisfied with their animalistic surrounding. Whereas if they treat people like that, they rebel, they cause problems. So anybody that wants to go to prison and act like an animal can do that in America today. But if you want to go to prison and be a human being, you have a difficult time doing that.
So who should be put in charge of changing things, or shouldn't we change anything? Just throw the key away and say, well, hey, that's how we
there
want
should
it,
be
that's how it
there
is.
should be public oversight. The families of prisoners should have a voice in the way prisons are operated, rather than it being handled by people who are callous, don't care, or are making a gigantic profit off of it. And that's where American prisons are going today, is to a profit motive. So it's becoming more like a zoo.
Now, the family, we have no rights. In fact, sometimes our actions reflect back to the prisoner or the inmate or the offender.
We try to use prisoner because we feel that that's an overall term. And
Right.
prisons keep trying to change the name of what the inmates, the prisoners, they see. They've even come up with names like residents. And that's about as far as you can get from truth.
But on most of the paperwork, you are referred to as an offender. Anything a family signs, you are the offender.
That's the recent motive.
That's a recent one?
Yes, that's very recent. Back, 30, 40 years ago, you were just a prisoner. And then inmate came along. And now they've moved it up to where you're an offender, or once you're in the prison, then you're a resident.
I know firsthand of cases where the family did try to help with something, and it just made it so much worse, and where they penalized and punished the prisoner.
Certainly.
Because the family is trying to help.
Well, that's part of violating the prison administrator's basic rule of do what you're told and don't make any waves if you're on the prisoner side. And if a family member makes waves, why, then it's the prisoner that's essentially causing that, according to the prison administration.
It is, but it just makes life really miserable for anyone. And then you have these you have people that come forward and they say, well, okay, well, you did this. I want you off the street. I want you gone, gone, gone. And what do we say to these people?
Well, once you get in prison, you lose all your rights. But there should still be treatment of people that are in prison as human beings.
It's humane, that's right.
And you are, as a human being in this country, you do have a certain level of rights. It was set up under the Constitution, and once you get into prison, prison administrators want to take all of those rights away and just treat you like an animal.
Like an animal. They, I lost my thought. Well, okay, I do that occasionally. Oh, yeah, I hear, that's what I wanted to say. There is over 2 million laws on the books at present.
Yeah, there's 2 million prisoners in prison.
That's right. So it won't take anything for any one of us to intentionally, unintentionally, to overstep our boundaries, and then, we are in the same situation that the prisoners are now.
Well, there's a lot of people in prison that were standing in the wrong place at the wrong time.
That's right.
There's a lot of dead people that were standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. And they were either killed or sent to prison just from being in the wrong place or running with the wrong people.
At the wrong time, yeah. Now, your editor, let's talk about the people that published the paper here. You said that, I forgot what you told me, you have several attorneys?
Well, the editor is Paul Wright.
Paul Wright.
Yes, the publisher is a gentleman in Florida who is Paul's father, and he holds the overall paperwork. But Paul and Ed Mead, who's now out, were the original founders of the paper in 1990. They had both dealt with a little bit of political activism in prison. Ed had been working on various publications for years, and they thought that there was a need at that time in the Washington State Prison to have an informative newsletter, which it started out to be a little 10 or 12 page mimeograph newsletter. And it just immediately they had a giant reaction of people wanting to read this information. So at first they did all the writing themselves, and then they started spreading the word out as the paper spread across the country. More people were interested in writing, so they said, okay, we have all these people out there that are capable and interested, let's encourage some of them to write. So they started out with prisoner writers, and then they found some attorneys that were interested in putting forth there. So we have several regular columnists now, 3 lawyer columnists that do quarterly columns for the paper, and a whole lot of prisoners that write for us. And they submit articles to the editor through the office because Washington State has a policy of inmate to inmate correspondence.
That's right.
Yeah, we have to clean it up and reformat it a little bit to get it to the editors. But what ends up is that Paul essentially determines the content of the paper from the information sent to him by prisoners and free world people on the outside.
Now, because we do tape this show in Washington State and we go to other places around the country, you're very familiar with the Washington, with the state prison. Whether I, on the other hand, I travel all over the country and I'm more familiar with the federal institutions.
Yes.
But right at this time, this was just on the news here, they're trying to shut down the legal libraries in the Washington State prisons.
Yes, this has happened in other states. Arizona was the first to lose their law libraries. I believe Ohio has lost theirs, and there's a number of other states that have either lost full library or they have changed them to a essentially unusable format. And Washington State's just the latest in taking the law libraries for what is being claimed to be economic reasons. But economic's not the real reason.
No, that's not the real reason, because I know we have an organization here that originates in Olympia. It's called Books for Prisoners. And I mean, people collect many, many, many books and send them into the prisons. The other thing is myself, I'm on a list on the internet. And we sent in Lapsang Vampa, that's a spiritual type book. We send Lapsang Vampa books that's out of print, by the way. And whoever needs books, we send them to. So I'm sure that if someone was to say, hey, we can no longer finance that, I'm sure there would be people to be willing to come forward and be more than happy than to pay for the books.
Yeah, right now the focus on the takeaway isn't the general library, though, it's the law library.
The law library, right. So if, you know, we could just double back and help with that.
The individual holding law library books in prison would be good for them. Of course, you'd have to have a cell 10 times as big as you have to have a usable law library in your house.
That's right, and every time they transfer you, they throw everything in the garbage.
And they don't allow you to loan your books to anyone else.
That's correct also.
And they don't allow you to help other people beyond a very certain low level of assistance. So if somebody had a large personal law library, they couldn't legally let anyone else use it. So there's just no excuse or any recourse. Once your law library is gone, there's a lot of reasons to have a law library in prison, and a lot of outside people that are now focusing on keeping that law library in prison. We could go into a number of the people that want to do that if you're interested.
Yeah, I just saw it on the news today now. What I have found by reading and by associating myself with these issues here is that a lot of rights that we have on the outside, the reason we have them is because there was a court ruling at one time or another that actually originated on the inside. What would you like to say to that?
Well, because prisoners have a lot of time to study, a lot of them have gone to the law library and done a lot of studying and filed suits that eventually reflected back on the outside, people on the outside. The reason that states want to take the law libraries away, the real reason, is because prisoners litigate. They have time to learn to be lawyers.
The other thing that I believe I got that off your webpage, and the webpage is listed at the end of the show, or else give me a call. One of the things that I found there was it talked about Shelton. Now Shelton is a prison that's very close to where we're located here.
Yes.
And in fact, didn't they ban that article? If you like to summarize that for me.
Well,
but we started them off really easy, so let's go.
The article you're speaking of ran in the May 1999 issue. It was called Black Guard, White Guard, and it was based from a number of black guards at the Shelton unit, which is called the Washington Correction Center, filing a lawsuit against the state of Washington based on the fact that a lot of the guards at that unit, and I might add other prison units in Washington State, were indeed racists, and some of them even carrying Nazi and Hitler paraphernalia. So there was a giant focus against the blacks that were guards, not just the prisoners.
Yeah, the guards.
And it was guards that filed the original lawsuit, and the state of Washington tried to cover it up real quick. But a lot of the information was in the Freedom of Information Act category, so it was acquired, and a lot of the information was acquired by our editor, who pre-wrote a story, and then an outside author picked it up. And it was originally ran in the Seattle Weekly, and then we had reprint rights on it. And that article was then banned by the Washington Department of Corrections.
It was, yeah.
Yes, and it's called Black Guard, White Guard, and it's the subject of present litigation in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals.
And that's the whole article is accessible to the webpage.
Yes, it is on the webpage.
Yeah, and I found it not surprising. I found it very interesting that, and lots of times when you ban something, of course, you draw the attention and you validate what that person does.
But you know, an interesting side note to that is when that article was banned, we couldn't even send the article to the editor who had essentially written the base of it. So we had a little problem in editing originally because it went in and was edited and came out without them ever noticing it. And then when we sent the finished newspaper in, they wouldn't let them have it. They already had copies of it. And since then, we found a point in time where we could easily send in to all of our Washington State prisoner subscribers a copy of that paper, which we did do. So they all got it anyway.
We had a sort of it was a healthy laugh, but a good laugh. Earlier here in the studio, we was talking about how, especially if you're on the inside, and how sometimes they will bend things and make up things so to make it fit, you know what I mean? And we were talking about, I was telling you about a story in my book about a man, Omar, that was up for drug charges. He got 27 years, and anyway, they made everything fit, and so now we cannot get him out of prison at all. And then we got to talking about the gang-related issues in prison, and then you came in and told me a story about
I have a friend. He was at one time a cell partner, and we became good friends over the years. And about 13 years ago, after he had been out briefly and then back in again, they decided that because he was capable of very charismatic kind of person, he was capable of teaching other prisoners, and what he was teaching them was to be careful, to not do things to offend, to not disrespect other prisoners. He was kind of essentially a peace person, a very peaceful kind of guy, and he was teaching other people to be peaceful. So they locked him up in gang lockdown as a gang member.
Can you clarify? I know what gang lockdown means. Would you be nice enough to explain
Well,
that?
it's a 24-hour-a-day lockup in a cell with sometimes not even any clothes. They have several layers of lockdown. If you act the slightest bit bad, they take away your clothes. They take away your right to even take a shower, except maybe once or twice a week. It's a really obnoxious way to live. It's worse, by far worse, than the way they treat any animal in this country.
I've heard of cases where they could only take a shower every 3 days and they were handcuffed.
Yeah.
How do you take a shower when you're handcuffed?
It's hard to do. Believe me, it's really hard to do. And generally what they do is they put you in a locked shower and then they take the handcuffs off you and then you have to get them back on again to get out of the shower. So you go to the shower and you return from the shower in handcuffs and sometimes even leg irons. And then while you're in the shower, actually, you're not handcuffed. But the problem that Dusty had is that he objected severely to being locked up as a gang member, and having done enough legal work and before he was locked up, he filed in a federal court requesting that the state tell him what gang he was a member of. In 7 years of litigating, a federal judge insisted that the director of corrections in Texas tell him what gang he was a member of. And Dusty said with a very straight face, the man told him that he was the member of the Gang of One.
Yeah, well, we had a very good laugh about that.
And of course, he's still in there.
Yeah, no, but no, I'm gonna take the other role again. I'm not a public. It's my tax dollars that's paying for all these court rulings. How do we justify that?
Well, the reason that there had to be a court ruling is because the state did something so odious, so stupid, that a prisoner had to go to a federal court and cost the government and the people a lot of money to have just a simple act defined to him, that what was the gang that he was a member of. When they locked him up, they should have told him, and then he would have had that period of time to fight that. He's still doing it in court.
Yeah, but can you imagine that? How, you know,
how ridiculous is it to do something like that to somebody,
yeah,
and then not tell them, we're locking you up because you're making peace among other prisoners.
That's right, yeah.
So for 13 years, he's been fighting the fact that he's a peacemaker on lockup.
But then, like the average citizen would say, well, okay, but he gets 3 meals and he has a place to stay. So if you want to pick it up from there, please.
If those are meals, I don't want to eat very many more of them, I'll tell you. He's lost a lot of weight because the food is really, really odious. It's terrible food. So if there's anybody on the outside that would like to eat that 3 meals a day instead of the 3 meals a day they eat, or even 1 if they eat it, I would invite them to go there and eat those meals. Most people on the outside would probably commit suicide if they had to eat crap like that every day.
Now, in the beginning of the show, I said this would be the first one of 2. So we're gonna talk about this for a minute, because at a later time in the next show we're gonna get back to the same subject again. Now, what happens here is that again, Omar, I'm going to use him for an example. He was in a Washington State jail to be held over for trial before he could go to the penitentiary. Well, you know, people kept telling me they were hungry. And I couldn't understand that. So one day I went there. I drove like 200 miles, regardless of what the weather was, to just get in there for 15 minutes at a time. And one time I was denied entry because there had been an emergency. And so I asked what the emergency was, and they said, well, the light bulb burned out in the visiting room. And so they would not change it. Well, it was at that visit, because I entered the place at a different time, and they escorted me out a different way, that I saw these garbage bags, and they had these little trays on it. They were no more than about like so. And that's when I realized what they were saying. They were hungry. So I wrote to the Department of Corrections, I wrote to the mayor of the town and everywhere, and I was told the diet was according to specifications. They got starches and meat in this, and then somebody managed to bring me a tray, you know, and I went to the lady that I know from the school board. Do you know that was half the portions than they feed a kindergartner at lunchtime?
I have no trouble believing that at all. None whatsoever. I have been there and ate those.
Is that just horrible?
And I can remember many years ago in Texas prisons that we were fed a lot of food. It was very basic food. But because they were working us 12 or 14 hours a day, they had to feed us something. So we ate a lot of beans and a lot of cornbread and a lot of gravy. But it was a lot more food then than what they're feeding prisoners now, who they claim don't need that much energy. So what's the best way to control somebody? Keep them hungry so they can't do anything.
They can't do anything, yeah. And then of course, medical care is non-existent.
Very close to it.
Would you like to start some horror stories? If not, I'll do it.
Well, you don't want to hear the horror stories of medical problems in prison. In fact, one of the issues that Prison Legal News is emphasizing right now is the lack of medical care. And the more horrible aspect of that is they're turning it over to private medical organizations who are in it for a profit. Well, what do people who have a profit motive do? They give you the very minimum amount of service. And everybody on the outside that's been to a medical care facility that's run by a private organization such as this under Medicare knows that. And you can magnify that.
Now, we're not talking about liver transplants here. We're talking about basic human illnesses.
If you have a broken bone, it might be 2 weeks before you see a doctor.
The example in my book was the diabetic with the tooth that couldn't get his tooth pulled. It almost cost him his life. When I go inside, I interview prisoners. There was one man, And actually, I read something similar like that in your news here. He had a tumor in his chest, and they wouldn't remove it. So the wife, back to what we were saying, how you get penalized, the wife went to the region and complained. So they packed him up, took him to the doctor's office, and they cut out his tumor in his chest without numbing it, without giving him anything at all. Can you imagine that?
Well, I have no problem imagining it. I've done some of it. I've been on the receiving end of some of that bad treatment. That's the reason I haven't got very many teeth left.
I mean, it is
my front teeth were taken by a defective dentist, not defective teeth, a defective dentist who worked for the Department of Corrections.
A lot of inmates have gold teeth. And
they got them before they went to prison.
Before they went to prison, yeah, I know, but yeah, that's what I meant. I didn't mean they got them there.
Yeah.
No, that's not what we meant. But they just always in a hurry to pull out the gold teeth.
Oh yeah, they're in a big hurry to get those.
Doesn't it remind you?
Yeah.
Some things here,
Auschwitz.
like concentration camp. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
prisons are moving more towards concentration camps.
So what do we tell the average citizen here?
Don't believe anything that a public official tells you about what's going on in a prison, because it's either a lie or some kind of a twist on the reality and the truth. If you want to know what's going on in a prison, talk to a prisoner.
Now, another interesting thing we found out that we had in common, sort of, the gentleman that did my book cover, he is in the Texas system, in the prisons there, and I lost track of him. I don't know where he is anymore. And by coincidence, you had heard of him before.
Yes, I've heard his name. I knew he was an artist. And I think at one time I was on a prison unit with him.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So because I did know his name.
He just, you know.
There's 150,000 prisoners in the Texas Department of Corrections, and I surprisingly know far too many of them.
From what I understand, Texas is about the worst.
Well, worst is one of those hard things to define. There's elements of many other prisons that are worse than anything presently going on in Texas, in a very small quantities. The supermax prisons. Virginia has a couple. One of them's called Red Onion, and the other one's Wallens Ridge. Horrible places where they're taking in prisoners from other states and treating them very badly. And Connecticut is actually snatching their prisoners back out of there where they put them on contract. And this goes on everywhere.
But here again, it's private enterprises.
Right.
Because we just don't have enough.
Private enterprise defines itself as corporate greed.
Yeah, it's horrible.
So anytime you have a privatization, which is another one of the issues that Prison Legal News is fighting tooth and nail, is privatization of prisons, privatization of medical care. Then the great big new monster that's coming on the scene is prison slavery.
Yeah, we talked about slavery in America and on our legal shows, and we defined it from a legal point of view. Now, would you like to define it from a human point of view?
Well, what's happening is that right now many prisoners like what they're doing is working for minimal wage minus and having most of it taken away. It gives them something to do, and it gives them a few dollars. Most prisoners in prisons in America today have no money unless they have someone on the outside that's stripping their own benefits and their own wages to send money inside. But I would say there's probably 85 or 90% of the prisoners inside that would be considered starving to death if they were on the outside as far as how much money they get. Some never get a penny from anybody. They don't have anybody on the outside.
Now, something else that is news to me, and we talked about that here a few minutes ago, is that I heard, or I read it in here, I believe, that some places take 30% of everything they get in. And so I wasn't aware of that. And then
Washington State is a 35% rule. They've recently been slapped for that and can't take anything that spouses send in. But anything else that's sent in to a prisoner is 35% of it's taken away. But the prison slavery issue, while a few of the prisoners in prison today like it because it gives them something to do and a few dollars, is it's working toward a point where industries going into prison, and there were established industries before they went to prison, so when they go into the prison, they fire their outside people.
That's
And we
absolutely
have
right.
we have a state right now in Washington State. There is a lawsuit brought by a bunch of water jet companies who cut metals, fabricate metals using high pressure water jets. A water jet company went into the Washington State Department of Corrections and fired its outside employees, let them go, opened up inside the prison for almost nothing, and employed the prisoners inside and were paying them minimum wages. And then the state turns around and takes most of that minimum wage, and the prisoner ends up with $1.35 an hour.
Yeah, now with Unicorn, I think the maximum, unless they raised it in the last year or so, was 23 cents. You see, and here we had already mentioned that, not, you know, just like you said, not only that, it takes other people's job. It runs
certainly
places
any job that a prisoner has
out of business.
Yeah, any job that a prisoner has in a prison, and he's only getting paid pennies or even $1 or so. That was an employee on the outside who was making a wage, a living wage, hopefully, at the very least, a minimum wage. So it's, and then once you get those people on the outside unemployed, why, they end up in prison somehow because they make new laws. People on the outside get desperate. They lose their job. What do I do?
Yeah, but then they
end up in prisoners.
Yeah, see,
then you get inside, and then they use them for slave labor.
That's right. Yeah.
So and this starts to remind you of something that happened in Germany and Russia.
Yeah. Now here's a little scenario here. POW/D, which stands for prisoner of war/drugs. When at the time that people get arrested, because in lots of places it's only alleged that something happened, they take all your property, your house, your car. They don't care if you have children. They don't care if you have a wife or whatever, or husband, vice versa. It offends your children. And so you find yourself in this horrible situation. Even if you walk away not guilty, they still have tied up your things for years.
There's been mitigation from that by the Supreme Court just lately, where there's a movement in law now to stop that. And indeed, there has been some stoppage of that in some state levels and a little bit in the federal level. But what needs to be done above all other things is stop the war on drugs.
Stop the war on drugs.
What they need to do is start a war on stealing in politics. Or corporations. You know, so let's have a new war. Stop corporations from stealing the people's money.
So I want to go full circle here with the money issue here. So they have taken everything. Your wife finally gets a minimum wage job because nothing is free in prison. From the toothpaste, you buy everything, and unfortunately I don't have a commissary list. So now I'm the wife. I will go and send you $50, and then, like you said, in some places they take 30 of that, and I'm being victimized and penalized again as an outsider.
And that isn't the end of it. If you have a telephone call with your prisoner,
that's where I'm going with that.
They're going to victimize you on that.
Victimize me on that, yeah. And so then let's go to the telephone. We've talked about the telephones again.
There's a lot of going on in the telephones. That's a brand new thing, essentially just in the last 10 years, which to me is brand new, where they've set up telephone systems in prison and then gigantic kickback contracts with telephone companies to charge the families, not the prisoner. The prisoner's not paying these bills. The prisoner's not paying a penny. He doesn't have any money to start with.
That's right.
So the family on the outside and anybody the prisoner contacts on the telephone is paying a premium high rate, not a premium low rate, a premium high rate that they don't charge anybody else anywhere in this country.
$9.80 for 15 minutes, and if you're lucky, and if not, it says click, it disconnects you, and you will be reconnected, and it's another $2 surcharge.
Yeah, there's the surcharges, and the worst of that is of every dime that you give to the telephone company, they kick a couple of pennies of it back to the prison, and the prison administration cannot explain where that money's going.
I think it's more than pennies. I tried to get to the bottom of that, even though eventually...
As high as 45%.
Eventually I went into a brick wall, but I did look into that. And then, of course, then here's your publication, and I look at this, and it says, oh, wow, you know, I can maneuver this cheaper. And then
There
you
is a
just
way of
told
doing
me,
that, yes.
would
There
you
are a
explain?
number of companies in the country, and this equates to business expansion line systems. If you have a business, you can put an expansion line in another city. Prison Legal News has an expansion line in Seattle. Our office is in Monroe, Washington. It's a long distance call. So anybody that calls our original Seattle number, it rings in the Monroe office. But the telephone is functionally in Seattle. Well, the same thing's been done by some private companies. They install a telephone near a prison where the prisoner's at. The outside person that telephone belongs to, they own that telephone number. The prisoner calls that local number, which is a local hookup charge, and the prison gets a little back from that. But then the long distance charge is handled by an outside provider who only charges the family member a small portion of what AT&T and US West does. The ones that handle my calls actually only charge us 5.5 cents a minute.
So
And the prison doesn't get any of that.
any of it. Now, then you got all settled and you got all organized and you have everything the way you need it. And then they transfer you at the expense of the
Yes, and then
the
you have to set up another
payable
telephone.
time. I was told it cost $18,000 to transfer a prisoner. Would you know if you could verify that?
I don't know. There's a lot of man hours involved in it. There's a lot of paperwork involved in it. But all those people that are getting paid to do that are the officials. And they're making work for those people so that they can hire more of them. It's the greatest welfare system in the United States. And it's not the prisoners that are getting it. It's the people on the outside that are otherwise unemployable, that are becoming prison guards and prison administrators and getting paid those sometimes very high salaries, sometimes not so high, and to continue guarding over the prison system. It's one of the fastest growing segments of employment in the United States today, is to be a prison guard.
One of the things that when you go and visit an inmate or a prisoner is they make things so miserable for you. They just forget that you're the visitor and not the inmate.
Well, they don't want you to come visiting.
That's right. You got all this family-oriented type thing. They make you so miserable that you probably just spend $500-600 just to get somewhere, and then they, and you just don't want to go anymore. What do you say to the public that would like to correspond or visit a prisoner, and they constantly run into that as an inside person? But what do you say to them?
Well, of course, you want visits if you're a prisoner. I didn't get very many when I was inside because I didn't have any family. I corresponded with an awful lot of people. But the object, of course, of making life miserable for a visitor, the prison says it's to keep illegal substances out of prison and illegal items out of prison. That's the reason they hassle them so much. But the real reason is to keep you from going to visit. They have very limited space for visitors. They have to use personnel for visiting. And those things detract from the guarding process of it. It's the antithesis of prison is to have visitors in prison. So prisons try to keep that from happening, and the easiest way to do that is make life so miserable of people going to prisons. And one of the new things here is a brand new toy they've come up with. It's an ion scanner. You walk through the ion scanner, and if you've been even near a narcotic lately, I mean, if you've handled money that passed through the dope, you can be evicted from the prison for essentially forever or for a period of time.
Now, when the last time I went to the federal penitentiary, they had a new toy there, and you would actually hold out your hands, and they, like a little vacuum cleaner.
That's an ion scanner.
Right. Well, I'm trying to describe it to the friends here, and then they stick it under this little device there, and they look at it, and I said to the lady, I'm staying at a hotel. Oh, because they do you free too, I said, I'm staying at a hotel, just supposing there was a person using drug in that hotel. And you know what she said? Well, tough shit. That's what she said.
I don't have any problem believing that at all.
Isn't that unbelievable?
No, it's not unbelievable, unfortunately, and that's the problem with American prison systems, is so much of what goes on at prisons, around prisons, with prisoners, is unbelievable to the average person on the outside. They just said, "Oh, the people are just complaining and whining because they're in prison." No, it isn't the case. And until the outside person, the free world, your audience, until they've actually had conflict with the system, they have difficulty believing it.
A friend of mine, Monica Ryan Smith, she's also a minister. She went on Omar's visiting list years ago. And in the meantime, he has not been transferred. I want to clarify that, because lots of times they lose your paperwork when they transfer you, and then you go there and so on and so on. Well, he had not been transferred, so that was not the case. This woman drives from Texas all the way to Illinois to go visit. I had prepared her for everything except the fact that they said, well, you're on the list, you can't get in. And it's such a matter, she felt so humiliated. And, well, it just freaked her out, and she left.
Well, this is a situation of the naive outside person making contact with the prison system. And they did just exactly what they intended to do.
Yeah, and her as a minister, she wouldn't have to be on any. She could have just said, "Here, I'm a minister. I need to see this person," but they make things so miserable,
Yeah. That's why visiting rooms in prisons continue to be small, and very few prisoners get visits.
Then you have vending machines to eat up your money. The food is mildewed. The whole thing is a joke. But what do we do to shake people up? I announced we was going to shake them up to the extent that they would start to think a little bit. I don't know. I don't really know if we have done that. Have we?
Well, I doubt it, because we have a lack of believing. The American media and the prisons, of course, are part of that same network, tell the people on the outside an entirely different story than we're telling them. And if they believe the politicians through the media, certainly they're going to believe the politicians that are talking about the prisons being really nice places that we should make tougher and tougher and tougher to keep these prisoners out of them. Make it so tough that people won't want to go to prison. But that's a lie, because then they turn around and make it so easy to get put in prison.
I've used this book before. It's not a book. When I was in St. Louis, instead of having yellow pages, they have, it's called the black pages. And, let's see. Yeah, wonderful. I can get this over here. And what they do is we've used this, I've showed this to you when we talked about adoptions and things like that. And what they did this time in here, they featured a lot of people in prisons, and it's called Where Did All the Young Men Go? And I can't see the monitor, so I think I'm right on target here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this and give you a sample of what this talks about. And it looks at personal stories of people inside of the penitentiaries. And it puts a face on them. And the reason I'm so impressed with this is because it's in a phone book. You don't have to go, let me see if I can turn this. You don't have to go to a lot of trouble to go to a bookstore to buy it, to see if that's of interest to you. It simply puts it in a phone book, and I did appreciate that.
It's unusual. I had never seen anything like this before, where there's a public access to prison pictures.
Prison pictures.
That shows where the people are going to.
Yeah.
And one of the greatest disgraces to America today is the number of young blacks that are going to prison at a ratio of probably 5 or 6 or 7 times higher than anybody else. And it's because they can do that, not because they need to be there.
Now, I can't see this. Am I running out of pictures, or am I on a different subject in this book here?
You're still in prison.
I'm still okay? Good. Yeah. This show has really been a challenge for us since yesterday. We had our camera crew got ill, and you lost your direction, so you got here an hour before us. And so we've really had some challenges, but maybe one more, huh? Then am I still good?
You're still there.
Okay. Well, the whole point was I wanted to show you this to show you that I so appreciated having this in a phone book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah,
There's a
St. Louis. Yeah.
Today in America, you're finding a sudden surge of books that are written with prison stories in them and prisoner stories in them. There's a whole bunch of new books that are coming out almost daily, and we have a book that we put out too that's prison things. Of course, that's prison legal news stuff there, old issues, and we got a new one coming out too. But there's becoming more of a focus as the media is starting to pay a little bit of attention to the problems of prisons. People are starting to get curious, and when free world people start to get curious, they go out and find a solution to their curiosity, and they're finding books, lots of books written by prisoners about prisons, and maybe it's going to focus some of the attention of America on the problems of prisons. And it's not a nice problem.
Now, for people that absolutely have never been touched by the subject, that don't know anybody in prison, why should we really recommend your paper anyway?
Well, because they need to know, because that's where their tax dollars are going. If anybody cares where their tax dollars are going in America today, they need to know what's going on in prison and prisons. It's terrible. And it's absorbing more and more. And looking at the long-range prospects, there's going to be more prisons with more people in them, therefore more people on the outside affected. And if they don't start learning, the outside people don't start learning where their tax dollars are going, and that this is a waste of money, and it's stealing from them, taking out of their pockets, taking away from the schools. Washington State's bad about it. They've dropped the school budget and raised the prison budget. The law libraries they're taking away is an effort, because the governor has essentially told all of the agencies that you have to reduce your budget. So the prison system, instead of getting rid of some of the fat and getting rid of some of the useless administrators, immediately went and took away the parts of the prison function that they didn't like. And of course, prison law libraries were right on top of that, because prison law libraries cause prison administrators problems.
That's right, yeah.
It makes them go to court.
Now, we're going to be running out of time here very shortly, so I want to set up, because I did say we was going to do 2 shows on this subject, where we can probably pick up next week where we're leaving off. Now, I did not have a chance to look at the poem that your friend wrote, but I feel, if you feel it's appropriate, I would like for you to read it before
I actually would be afraid to read that on the air.
You would?
It is so strong. And it's not a poem it's not actually a poem. It's a written statement, and the name of it is I Am the Prison. And it's written from the aspect of what a prison is and what a prison contains. And I wish everybody in the country could read it, because it would scare them to death.
Okay, well, we'll make it available on the webpage then. So if you like to, you can access that. And thank you for really sharing this subject with us. And now I'm going to flip it to the spiritual for just 1 second. In some strange way, we have to thank you for having chosen this path, because if it wasn't for you, then you couldn't be sitting here and educating people about, and you're lecturing, am I right?
Well, yes, I try to. And the main reason that I do this today is because I spent so much time in the prison system that I came out and started playing a little bit of corporate. I worked at a good job for a little while in electronics. And then when this was offered to me, I thought, well, this is something that needs to be done. I don't make much money from it, and it keeps me busy, way too many hours. But it's something that needs to be done.
That's the whole thing. We have all the experiences we put in these life situations to become who we are. And then what happens, budget or no budget, like this show has no budget, but we're driven, it's our passion. We want to make a difference, one person at a time.
America needs to be educated. The prisoners that are in prison need to be educated. This is just a tiny little effort to do that.
It is, yeah.
And it needs to be done. There needs to be a lot more of it.
So what do you tell your children?
I don't have any.
No,
oh, what do they tell their children? Stay away from the law. Learn what the law is and what the law does, and don't learn it from the law. Learn it from a prisoner.
And then stay away from it.
And then they'd stay away from it.
Don't do it.
The reason that you shouldn't violate laws in America and that you should treat officers of the law in a certain way that's not taught in school is to keep out of the prisons and try to stay away from the situations where you can go to prison.
Go to prison, yeah.
And America's driving its youth to prison.
Yeah.
Through poverty, possibly.
Whole generation of people has, you know, even if you do get out after 30, 40 years, there are no rights in them. We're going to talk about some of the new rulings in the voting rights on our next show. And again, I'm really grateful that you took the time to come and do that.
Well, it needs to be done.
So you're going to hang with us for a while now?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But you have your calling. So you see, sometimes when things get replaced by things of equal or greater value, our whole life can change, you know. Yeah. And but we're not going to do the poem. You recommended the book.
Well, I believe that everybody should read the book.
Read the book, okay, and then we'll...
And you can access it through our website.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming, and I guess we'll see you next week.
Okay.
And with another one, the second part of the present show. Goodbye. Thank you for coming.